The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. Next, we proceed to counsel for Evidentiary to continue putting questions to the witness. You may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, Your Honors. Good morning to everyone again in and around the courtroom. Witness, we were back, before we took the break, we were with document E3/459. If I could get you to go back to that document, to the page numbers that we were talking about. And let's see if we can clarify a couple of points. First of all, is the professor that you're talking about in this exchange Kun David, or are we talking about another professor?
Response. Yes, indeed, we are now talking about Mr. Kun David.
To the best of your recollection, about when would it have been that you went to Pong to tell him about what Uncle Pol Pot had told you about Kun David?
Response. It was when I met Pong accidentally to talk to my uncle about Mr. Chun David. I think about a few weeks later when I met with Pong.
Do you recall what month it would have been? I know we're talking over 30 years ago, but do you recall the month?
Response. I don't remember the exact month, but I remember that it was perhaps a fortnight before Pong disappeared.
All right, and to the best of your recollection now, do you know about when Pong disappeared?
Response. I don't remember the exact date, but my recollection is that Vietnamese was approaching Phnom Penh very closely already.
When Pong disappeared, were you informed at the time about his disappearance?
Response. I did not receive any information concerning the disappearance of Pong because it was very complicated, and our ministry, we only focused on our preparation to evacuate.
Was there some sort of a formal announcement that Pong had disappeared?
Response. There was no official announcement concerning this.
So how do you know he disappeared?
Response. When there was no information, when there was no connection to the ministry, because normally when Pang was in the office, he would be seen coming by motorcycle or by car, or would be seen walking around, but later on he did not appear to be seen by anyone. Judge Laverne says, the President Council Kanawas, could you please hold down? Judge Laverne has the floor now.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sorry for interrupting the flow of questioning from Council Carnivus, but I would like to draw the party's attention to the fact that on the 24th of April last, the prosecution put before the Chamber a document IS 5.14. This document is submitted as being Hong's statement, confession rather, and as regards the dates that are mentioned, it appears that the first date on which Bong's confession was reported is the 28th of May 1978, and the last date that is available on the document, of which we do have French and English translations, is the 22nd of July 1978. I think this is important because several times the witness said that Bong's arrest might have taken place in the days before the arrival of the Vietnamese in Phnom Penh, in other words, the end of 1978. So I do believe that there is a contradiction, and we do have some evidence that we can draw upon in elucidating this. Thank you.
The President, thank you. Judge Laverne, Council Kanawas, you may now proceed.
Thank you. I do appreciate the observation. One of the problems that we have as parties is, one, we cannot avail ourselves to these sorts of documents, and two, I didn't want to lead the witness with a document by, and make a suggestion. Normally in my jurisdiction I would be entitled to use whatever document in the file, but to bring it to the court's, to the gentleman's attention, and to see whether he wished to revise his statement. So that's why I hesitated to do that. Perhaps with some more guidance, we can we'll know what the do's and what the rules of the road are concerning the use of these sorts of documents and other documents. But there we have it, witness. It would appear that we have a confession, and the earliest one is May 28, 1978. Now, thinking back, realizing it's over 30 years, would that be about the time when Pong stopped coming around, sometime around May 1978? Let me ask the question again. We have just heard that there is a confession from Pong, who obviously was arrested, and the date of the confession, of the first confession, is May 28, 1978. The confession that we know of was taken from Pong while he was under the care and supervision of Doik at S21. So it would appear from the confession that Pong, at least as of May 28, perhaps earlier, was not out and about the streets of Phnom Penh So now I would like you to reflect back and tell us, does this correspond with your memory, or are you simply unable to get the months and dates correctly because it's been so long?
Response. I recollect that when the Vietnamese came, I had not seen Pong for some time already. However, I have no idea of what happened to the confessions and how they were taken. When Pong was my superior, or when I was under the supervision of Pong, it was close to the time when the Vietnamese had already been approaching Phnom Penh.
When Pong stopped coming around, did anyone else from the security branch come around to introduce themselves as Pong's replacement?
Response. No. In my ministry, we were told to master ourselves, to be self-mastery, indeed to prepare ourselves and manage things on our own, and this instruction could only be done through Brother Ieng Sari.
You told us over the course of several days that Pong would come and go. Pong brought people to the ministry. Pong took people away from the ministry. And so now my question is, after Pong disappeared, did someone else replace him in order to bring people to the ministry and then take them away again at some other point?
Response. As I indicated, no.
Now you did indicate that at some point that Boeing Trebek and another area, another place, Chirang Chimrai, and I apologize for the pronunciation, I did try, I did practice, came under the supervision at some point of the MFA. Correct?
Response. Yes, it was time when they were transferred to be under the supervision of the MFA.
And as I understand your testimony, prior to them being transferred to the MFA, they were under the supervision of Pong. Is that correct?
Response, yes it is.
And when they were transferred over to the supervision of the MFA, if you could think back, do you recollect seeing Pong out and about, riding his motorcycle or driving around Phnom Penh?
Response, yes.
Now, in the statement that you have in front of you, which is E3/459, with the same area that we were discussing earlier, you indicate that only 1 month before the Vietnamese came and took control of Phnom Penh, the supervision of the Bong Travai office was handed back over to the foreign ministry. During the era when Pong supervised there, much trouble occurred. Do you see that?
Response, yes I do. However, before the Ministry of Foreign Affairs took charge of Bang Trabai, it had been no more than, it was not up to a month, it was about 2 weeks, because the time was very short back then, and we were in a rush.
Can you explain how it is that Pong had supervision over both these places, Bong Travai and Charang Chamre? How is it that he came to have supervision over these two institutions, if we want to call it that, in addition to being the head of the Office 870, plus being in charge of security? Do you have an explanation how Pong could have managed all of these things?
Response, in conclusion, it was up to him.
And I take it, based on the principle of minding your own business, you never had any discussions with the gentleman to figure out exactly what his authority and responsibility was over those two places.
The President, Counsel, could you repeat the question, because the witness appears to have misunderstood the question, because he perhaps mistaken the question for a statement as the Khmer in Khmer rendition. It's more like a statement than a question.
Apologies. Did you ever have a conversation with Pong to ask him about his exact responsibilities for those two places that ultimately came under the control and authority of the MFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
តាមខ្ញុំចាំ
Response: to the best of my recollection, Bong Ieng Sari said, Bang Trabek or Trang Chamreh.
បងគេថាឲ្យហុងឯងហ្នឹងទទួលខុសត្រូវហើយតែប៉ុណ្ណា
Bang said that Hong, you had to be responsible for that, and that's it. That's what he said.
If you could listen to my question and answer my question. I'm asking you, did you ever have a conversation with your previous supervisor, Pong, to ask him what exactly his responsibilities were?
បាទអត់ទេ
Response: no.
And when those two institutions were put under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, were you provided with any documentation from Pong so you could at least see what exactly he had been doing while they were under his control and authorization?
ខ្ញុំបាទខ្ញុំមិនបាន
Response: no, I wasn't. I did not receive any documents when Pong took charge of these two places.
All right, I'm going to switch topics now, and this may be our very last topic. I want to speak about Koi Tun and his confession. Did you know Koi Tun?
បាទស្គាល់
Response: yes, I did.
Did you know him prior to April 75? 1975, that is.
7 មេសាបាទស្គាល់មុន
Response: yes, I did.
And how is it that you got to meet Koi Tun? In what capacity?
លោកជួបក្នុងមុខងារឬក៏សមត្ថកិច្ចរបស់លោកដោយរបៀបណាដែរ
ខ្ញុំ
Response:
ខ្ញុំធ្វើការងារបែកនៅភ្នំពេញដោយគេចាប់ខ្ញុំដាក់គុកពីរឿង
I worked in Phnom Penh and detained because I started a demonstration against the American imperialists by distributing leaflets. I met Koi Tun in Kroche province.
In what year was that?
ក្នុងឆ្នាំ
It was in 1967 or 68.
And between 1967 and 68, did you have an opportunity to see Koi Tun other than in Krache?
ខ្ញុំ លែងបានជួបហើយ
I never saw him again.
You never saw him in the jungle while you were there.
ព្រៃដែរនៅពេលដែលលោកនៅទីនោះ
ខ្ញុំធ្លាប់បានជួបនៅព្រៃ
I saw him in the jungle
ដង
once.
នៅឯរតនគិរី
It was in Ratanakiri.
And at the time, up until, for instance, April 1975. Do you know what position Khoi Toon had?
ខ្ញុំដឹងតួនាទីគាត់ថា
I knew that he was the head of the zone.
Which zone?
ភូមិភាគនៅមានកំពង់ធំកំពង់ចាម
It was the zone in which we had Kampong Thom and Kampong Cham. I'm not sure what zone it was.
កំពង់ធំកំពង់ចាមសៀមរាបបាទ
In that zone we had Siem Reap, Kampong Thom and Kampong Cham.
ភូមិភាគឧត្តរអីហ្នឹងបាទគេហៅជំនាន់ហ្នឹងបាទ
Probably it was the north zone.
All right. And was that an important position for him to hold during that period as zone leader?
របស់គាត់ដែរឬយ៉ាងណាក្នុងឋានៈគាត់ជាមេភូមិភាគនោះ
បាទខ្ញុំដឹងថាគាត់សំខាន់នៅក្នុងភូមិភាគហ្នឹង
I knew that he was an important person in that zone.
And would Uncle Pol Pot know of him during that period?
ពីកុយធ្ងន់ដែរទេក្នុងកំឡុងពេលហ្នឹង
ខ្ញុំអត់បានដឹងថាស្គាល់របៀបម៉េចទេ
I did not know how he knew of him.
Now, after the fall of Phnom Penh in April 1975, do you know what position or positions Khoi Toon held?
អ្វីដែរទូនាទីអ្វីដែរ
ខ្ញុំដឹងថានៅតែប្រធានភូមិភាគដដែល
I still knew that he was the chairman of the zone.
Do you know whether at any time prior to his arrest, whether he held any other positions outside the zone?
ភូមិភាគដែរទេ
ខ្ញុំអត់ដឹងដែរ
No, I did not.
Do you know whether he was connected in any way with any ministries?
ជាប់ពាក់ព័ន្ធអ្វីជាមួយនឹងក្រសួងដែរទេ
តើក្រសួងណា
What ministries are you talking about?
I'm asking you whether you knew at the time, somewhere between 1975 and the time of his arrest, whether he was involved or connected to any ministries here in Phnom Penh.
ក្នុងពេញដែរទេ
ខ្ញុំអត់បានដឹងទេ
I did not know about that.
Do you know whether he was part of the center or central office?
សមាជិកនៅក្នុងមន្ទីរមជ្ឈមដែរទេ
ខ្ញុំអត់បានដឹងទេ
No, I did not.
Do you know whether he was connected in any way to what has been referred to the upper echelon?
ការថ្នាក់លើដែរទេ
ខ្ញុំអត់បានដឹងទេ
No, I do not.
Do you know whether he was involved with or part of this concept of Angkar?
ជាសមាជិកនៅគំនិតដែលយើងហៅថាអង្គការនោះដែរទេ
ប្រហែលជានៅក្នុងនោះដែរ
He was probably part of
អង្គការដែរ
that part of Onka.
Now, are you speculating or are you telling us from first-hand knowledge? Which of the two?
បាទខ្ញុំនិយាយស្មានពីព្រោះគេអត់
I am speculating because
ប្រាប់ថាអ្នកនេះជាស្អីស្អីទេ
I was not told as to who was who, but I was told that he was the chairman of the zone.
ណានុក្រមអីផ្សេង
I did not receive any written documents which indicated that who held particular positions at various places, but I was told that he was the chairman of the zone, and so I knew that he was part of ANCA.
All right. Now, when he was arrested and later on you came to hear of his confession or confessions, was he considered at the time an important person?
ខ្ញុំអត់បានវិភាគអីទាំងអស់
I did not analyze anything.
ខ្ញុំត្រូវតែនៅស្ងៀម
I had to remain silent.
រឿងគេដឹងរឿងឯងដឹង
They knew their own business and I knew my own.
Let me ask the question again. When you heard of his arrest and you heard of his confession, which apparently you've indicated was read out to you, at that time, to your knowledge, to your understanding, was Koitun an important person?
When his Koitun's documents were read out, my feeling was that he was not like what was described in the document when he worked with me, as I used to meet him. So I did not make any conclusion as to who was right and who was wrong.
All right. Now, you've indicated that this document or confessions were read out to you. Do I have it right? That you actually never saw, but you learned of the content from somebody reading that to you, the confessions. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct.
And having heard the confession, did you have any particular feelings at the time? Considering who Koitun was and the confession itself.
I could not answer that again. I think my earlier response was specific enough.
Okay, when you say your earlier response, what do you mean by that? Were you happy? Were you sad? Were you frightened? Were you angry? Were you surprised?
I had confused feeling. I did not know what was all about. I could not think of anything. I could not think of any reasons. Everything was confusing.
Why was it confusing?
The reason why I was confused was that when he worked with me, he was a good person. He did well. But as was read out in the document, he was a different person, and so I was confused.
All right. Well, on April 24th, 2012, you indicated on page 51 of the English transcript, which is right above the timer of 14.26.16, after he read the confessions, both Mr. Ingshiri and I, as well as everyone, became afraid. Do you recall making that statement here in court under oath last week?
ហើយលោកបានស្បត់ដែរឬទេ
ខ្ញុំបានឆ្លើយប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំមិនបានស្បត់ទេ
I did answer that, but I did not take an oath.
Very well. Do you stand by that statement that you told us here last week, that after the confession was read out, both Mr. Ingshiri and you, as well as everyone else, became afraid?
But
Yes, I do.
And why did you, at least, knowing your own feelings, why did you become afraid, having heard Koi Toon's confession?
ស្ដាប់ដូចខ្លឹមសារចម្លើយសារភាពរបស់លោកកុយធួននោះ
ខ្ញុំឆ្លើយម្ដងរួចទៅហើយខ្ញុំអត់ឆ្លើយតទៅ
I already answered that question. I don't think I can answer that question anymore.
At the time, did you know how that confession was extracted?
គេទាញដោយរបៀបណាដែរទាញយកដោយរបៀបណាដែរ
ខ្ញុំមិនដឹងក្បួនខ្នាតគេទាញអី
I did not know how the confessions were extracted.
ដល់ការទាញចម្លើយនេះ
I did not analyze the way that confessions were extracted. I did not think about that. President, Council, can you pay attention to the content of the confessions that you base on to put questions to this witness? The chamber notes that you based on a confession to put questions to this witness. You may only base on the confession to ask about the date of people who were arrested, the time that people were arrested, but you could not base on the content of the confession to put more detailed questions on that.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was merely asking the gentleman whether he knew how the confession was gotten. But I take the point. Now, in one of your statements, you indicated that you knew that Son Sen had taken charge of security. And this would be in E3/415. Do you recall saying that? That Son Sen had taken charge of security?
But ខ្ញុំឆ្លើយចឹងបាទ
Yes, I do. I answer that.
And do you know today, or can you recall back then, I should say, whether Son Sen had anything to do with either the arrest or the confession of Koi Toon?
សារភាពរបស់កុយធួនដែរឬទេ
បាទខ្ញុំអត់ដឹងទេបាទ
I did not know about that.
Now, in the same document, and I'm referring to Khmer page 00357-531, French 00405457, English 00361014, or page 7 in English. You say here, in light of Khoi Thun, I knew too someone had sent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs some documents which were kept by Mr. Sung Sakun, but when fleeing, all were lost. According to my knowledge, many things were made up in these documents. I did not read the documents of Khoi Thun and that of Huy Nim personally, but someone read for me. I understood that for these confessions, I did not believe that those people had done such things. Have you found that passage, sir?
បាទ
Yes, I have seen it.
Now, you mentioned Huy Nim. Did you know him?
បាទខ្ញុំធ្លាប់បានស្គាល់
I knew him.
And did you know his position at the time?
ខ្ញុំគ្រាន់តែដឹងថាគាត់
I only knew that he was in the front.
When you say the front, are we talking about back in before 1975? Or are we speaking about 1975 to 79? Which of the two periods?
Between 1975 and 1979, I thought he was working in the front.
All right. Do you know what his job was?
I did not know about that.
Now, well, may I ask, during that period, did you have much contact, if any, with Huy Nim?
No, never.
Now, you mentioned him, you mentioned Huy Nim, along with Khoi Thun. And so my question is, do you know whether Huy Nim's confession was read out at the time?
What is your question about?
Okay, let me rephrase it. You told us that Khoi Thun's confession was read out. Were other confessions read out as well, or was it merely Khoi Thun's confessions that were read out?
As I remember, only Khoi Thun confession was read out.
Do you recall what was in the confession? What was the accusations, or what were the crimes that he allegedly had committed?
I forget all about it.
Do you know whether any circulars were sent around about Koi Toon's confession and his alleged offenses at the time?
រួមទាំងការចោទប្រកាន់លើកុយធួនឲ្យគេឯងដឹងផងដែរនោះ
បាទអត់បានដឹងទេ
I did not know about that.
Was Koi Toon's confession and his crimes, the alleged crimes that he would have committed, was that widely publicized at the time, if you recall?
President, witness, can you wait until your mic has been activated?
បាទអត់បានដឹងទេ
Response. I did not know about that.
But to the best of your recollection, at least in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs where you were involved, there was a discussion about what he had confessed to doing. Is that right?
បាទខ្លឹមសារបានស្ដាប់បានដោយខ្ញុំជំរាប
I heard of the content of the confession, but as I said, I now forget about it.
And what sort of a discussion took place after hearing what Koi Toon had confessed about?
ពិភាក្សាលើអ្វីដែរហើយតើមានបានពិភាក្សាថាតើចម្លើយសារពាក្យរបស់កុយធួននោះគាត់ឆ្លើយអ្វីខ្លះ
ពេលនោះពិភាក្សាគ្នានេះថា
At the time,
ខ្ញុំចាំព្រាលទេនឹងខ្ញុំខំឆ្លើយ
as I do not remember it for sure, but I try my best to answer it.
តាមហើយទៅសួរជារួមថាបងប្អូន
The discussion was about asking people whether they were connected
នឹងឆ្លើយ
by any ways to Koi Toon, and then those people answered.
ស្រ័យបើឆ្លើយកុំឲ្យប្រកប
They were urged to tell whether they were
ដែល
connected to Koi Toon
យើងអាន
and that they would be
ខូចខលចេញចោល
tolerated.
ខ្ញុំឃើញ
If so,
ហ្នឹងច្បាស់ជាងគេ
I
អីទៀត
remember the word morality.
មិនដឹងទេតើមានខូចខលសិលធម៌អីចឹង
We were asked whether we had any moral offenses,
មិនមានទូមិនមានពីអីទេ
and we were encouraged to tell this because
មានអា9ជាន់
we were promised that there would not be any problem with that. And
សូមជំរាបប៉ុណ្ណឹងបាទ
as I said, the 7-layer mechanism was also referred to during the discussion.
Now, having raised the issue of morality, do you recall whether Koi Toon had confessed to immoral acts?
President, witness, please hold. President, witness should not answer this question because this question is based on a confession which is not allowed by the law.
Do you know if there were any rumors about Koi Toon's acts of immorality prior to his arrest and prior to his confession. This is when he would have been zone leader up in the northern zone, as I understand it.
No.
Now, you did tell us that when you heard what was in the confessions, you did not, or you had a, as I understand what you said, was you did not believe them, or you had a hard time believing what you were hearing. Can you please explain that a little bit? Why were you surprised to hear those things, or why did you find them unbelievable?
President, witness should not answer this question. It is a repetitious question, and it is based on the confession extracted by torture. It seems that counsel is basing his questioning on the same confession. It appears that counsel is running out of questions.
You told us about being afraid, about being implicated. Having been exposed to this particular event where Koi Toon's confession was discussed, did that in any way heighten your anxiety about being implicated by anyone for anything?
I can put it this way. Before Bong arrested people and I was afraid, and when he referred to the 7 or 9 layer mechanisms, I was not afraid.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. Your Honors, I have no further questions. I believe that terminates or exhausts my examination of this witness. Sir, thank you very, very much. On behalf of Mr. Ingsari, we wish to express our gratitude for you coming here to give your evidence and wish you safe travels.
President, thank you, counsel. Thank you, witness. It is now appropriate for us to adjourn for a lunch break. The chamber will take 1 hour and a half break, half-minute break. Court officer is instructed to accommodate this witness and return this witness to this courtroom along with his duty counsel at 1:30. Just defense counsel for Mr. Nguyen Chia, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. I have in my hands the well-known written waiver of my client. He would like to stay downstairs this afternoon to follow proceedings from the holding cell.
President, thank you. You may be seated, counsel. Having heard the request of Mr. Nguyen Chia that has been made through his counsel to waive his rights to be present in this courtroom and to follow the remainder of the proceedings through audiovisual means, and as defense counsel promised that he would submit the written waiver made by Nguyen Chia to the chamber grants the request. that have been made through his counsel to follow the proceedings remotely from a holding cell downstairs for the duration of the afternoon session. He waived his rights to be present directly in this courtroom. The chamber requires that defense counsel for Nuon Chea submit immediately to the chamber the written waiver with a signature or thumbprint of Mr. Nuon Chea. The AV unit is now instructed to live the proceedings so that this accused person can follow the proceedings remotely. For the afternoon session, security guards are now instructed to bring Mr. Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan to their holding cell downstairs and keep Mr. Nuon Chea there for the afternoon session so that he can follow the proceeding remotely, and to bring Mr. Khieu Samphan to this courtroom by 1:30. The court is now adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកចុះ